Welcome to a new Energy Capital interview. I'm Belina Ferrer, and today we'll be talking with Jorg Heinemann, Chief Executive Officer at EnerVenue. Hi, Jorg. It's great to see you today. How are you?
Great to be with you.
Well, thank you so much for taking this interview. In this interview, Jorg will talk with us about the future of grid-scale energy storage. So without further introduction, I'll start with the first question. How is EnerVenue innovating in grid-scale battery storage?
At EnerVenue, we are taking an old technology called nickel hydrogen batteries that's been in use for aerospace applications for nearly 40 years, and we've dramatically cost reduced it through new materials. And the result is a battery that is extremely durable, meaning it can last nearly forever, 30,000 cycles, which would be charging and discharging the battery 3 times a day for 30 years. So that's practically an infinite life battery. And then it has power characteristics that are similar to what we're familiar with from cell phones and electric vehicles, and that it can be charged quickly or slowly, and then discharged quickly or slowly. So think infinite flexibility, infinite durability, and then it's also very safe, and it's also super simple and very environmentally friendly, meaning it's made of earth-abundant materials, lasts a very long time, and at the end of that useful life can be repurposed for something else and recycled nearly 100%.
Well, I'm aware that lithium-ion batteries present various challenges, one of those being their environmental footprint. How do newer types of grid-scale batteries, such as gravity-assisted, sodium-ion, hydrogen, metal, etc., stack up environmentally? How do they or can they differ from lithium-ion here?
Yeah, I think as we look across the energy storage spectrum, there are trade-offs associated with each technology. For example, pumped hydro, which has been in use for decades, is perhaps in some ways quite environmentally friendly in terms of a carbon footprint. However, it has significant challenges in terms of permitting it. It requires dams and infrastructure and hillsides and those types of things. Lithium-ion batteries have a very significant challenge around the recyclability. Typically, maximum recyclability is roughly 70%. It's expensive, it's dangerous, and it leaves a lot of basically toxic chemicals throughout the process and potential dangers for the folks performing the recycling activity. EnerVenue's battery is unique in that what we do is have earth-abundant materials. They're assembled in a very simple way. There's no moving parts, and the disassembly or the recycling is basically the reverse. So it's you can cut the device open and then by hand unstack the thing and repurpose it for something else. The materials are available all over the planet, meaning that we can make this from scratch on any continent in the world. And it's what the sustainability people would call a cradle to cradle product. So it goes from natural material through a life cycle and then gets repurposed for something else without waste in between.
In that sense, can you explain some other advantages or innovations of these new battery types, perhaps also compared to lithium-ion?
Yeah, the principal differences are, so lithium-ion is quite good from a power characteristic standpoint. Our battery is very similar. That's the rate at which it can be charged and discharged. It makes it usable for everything from short duration purposes, such as keeping the grid in balance, let's say, between short intermittency, or storing energy from when the sun is able to charge the batteries to when it's required, when the sun isn't shining, say in the evenings or night times or mornings. So it's very flexible in that regard. Our key differences, though, are the lifespan. A lithium-ion battery typically wears out. It's basically a consumable item. So if you think about the cell phones we carry around, my iPhone is about 1.5 years old. Its maximum capacity is now just over 80% of its original capacity. And it's very close to when it reaches that point, it starts to degrade very quickly, and likely within a few months, I'm going to need to replace that battery. EnerVenue's battery, on the other hand, does not degrade like that. It basically keeps its capacity, its level of charge, for an incredibly long lifetime. So imagine a cell phone that that could last forever without having to replace the battery. Now, our battery is larger and heavier, so it's something you would use for stationary use, for use in a home, to power a home, solar plus storage in a home, for example, or at grid scale applications, solar or wind integration, say, with our battery. The other thing that we bring is lithium-ion batteries, as you might have noticed, are quite dangerous in terms of fire capability. If they get wet, basically that causes a fire and causes a problem. If they're exposed to a fire, it's a very challenging situation. And then if the battery gets too hot, it can do what's called a thermal runaway, which is where you have a battery pack that catches on fire, that catches the battery pack next to it on fire, and before you know it, you have what the industry calls a large thermal situation, which is a euphemism for a big fire problem, which is something that obviously everyone is sensitive to. That cannot happen with our battery. So our batteries work in a completely different way. We have basically a container, we call it a vessel. And within that is a stack of electrodes. As we charge the battery, we build up a small amount of hydrogen within that vessel. And then as we discharge the battery, that hydrogen gets reabsorbed into water. It's like a low pressure hydrogen fuel cell. And that reaction is that charge, discharge, build hydrogen, reabsorb hydrogen back into water. Very robust, very durable, and also very, very safe. So it's a significantly different type of battery.
Wow.
The safety factor are such that we believe these batteries can actually be integrated into structures. Meaning, so imagine having the crawl space of a home or the attic of a home filled in part with batteries. That's dead space, unused for anything else. The battery basically lasts forever. It doesn't require maintenance. So you could build in the battery into the construction of the home without having to, say, use up garage space or wall space or space outside the building or structure and so forth. That can be done with our battery, cannot be done with other batteries.
How did EnerVenue first develop this new technology? Were there technical hurdles or challenges that EnerVenue came across as it first built out these batteries?
Yeah, so nickel hydrogen batteries, which is the fundamental technology we're using, they were actually designed in the 1980s and then deployed in the 90s and 2000s for aerospace applications, specifically satellites, the International Space Station, the Hubble Space Telescope. And they were designed at a time when that use case, aerospace satellites, they needed a battery that would have a crazy long lifetime and could not be maintained, because sending a maintenance technician to replace a battery pack in outer space is extraordinarily expensive. And it had to be able to withstand the rigors of outer space, very high temperatures, very low temperatures. So these batteries were designed then, deployed in the 90s and 2000s. And then when many of us got involved in renewable energy about 15 years ago, the solar industry sprang up, a lot of battery startups came on board. And what I think happened is this technology, nickel hydrogen, was simply ignored by the industry because it was candidly way too expensive. So while these batteries worked very, very well, they were maybe 100 times as expensive as would be appropriate to be economical in today's world. Well, about 4 years ago, our founder, Professor Yi Shui at Stanford, who's one of the top material scientists in the world, has been studying various kinds of batteries for many, many years. He asked his team to go think through what would be a super long-lasting battery that could be durable and flexible and safe and very useful for this use case I've described. And he said, well, gee, what if we use nickel and hydrogen in combination. And then the way he tells the story is he was very excited one day because he realized this nickel is this super durable element. The hydrogen catalytic reaction is very, very good. And then he realized it had been done before. And so the next day he said, oh, he's depressed. Then he realized that it had been done in this way using materials that were really, really expensive. So he put his team to work on, could we do the same thing, but with far lower cost materials? And what the team did, and that team is now my team, what we did is replaced 2 or 3 of the most expensive elements that accounted for 90% or more of the cost with very low cost earth abundant materials. And then we tested it, and we thought that we would have lower cost materials, but perhaps less performance that would go hand in hand with the lower cost. But that combination of lower performance but lower cost would make sense. What happened in 2020 is we learned that actually these lower cost materials, not only were they much lower cost, they actually perform better for this use case than the original materials. So what we have now is a battery that is affordable for a huge majority of stationary storage use cases, and it outperforms these super capable batteries that have a 30-year track record of operating in the harshest climates conceivable, in the aerospace applications and up in satellites and those types of things. So we've proven that the battery works, and then now we've built several thousand at this point and have done a huge amount of testing, and we're rapidly scaling up our manufacturing capability and then our large-scale deployment capability, and we're doing that over the next few years. We've raised a huge amount of capital recently, which I can tell you about if you're interested, but it's very, very exciting to know we have a technology that actually works. So the science, if you will, is very, very solid. Our team is doing a lot of engineering optimization, and there's a lot of challenge around scaling up manufacturing and so on. Those are big challenges, but they're far easier to predict, to manage, and to control than, for example, waiting for a scientific breakthrough, which is candidly what most battery companies are working to get a new technology to work. We know ours works.
Well, the company has been on a path of expansion with funding and partnerships with Schlumberger in September 2021 and Tangas earlier in the year. How will these partnerships expand the company's business model?
Yeah, so we just recently closed a Series A round of fundraising last quarter, we finished closing the round at $125 million. That round was led by Schlumberger New Energy, as well as Saudi Aramco Energy Ventures participated, and then Town Gas, which is a gas utility that serves Hong Kong and Greater China, is also a key investor in that. All 3 of those players are very, very interested in our technology because they're all looking to capitalize on the energy transition. They recognize that their core business, which in all 3 cases had been oil and gas, is now pivoting to power, specifically renewable power. And they've looked at our technology. Frankly, they've looked at pretty much every technology that's out there, but they really like our unique capabilities that I've described: the flexibility, the durability, the safety, and view it as critical for them in their energy transition work that they're using to convert their existing oil and gas industry customers to new energy. So a simple way to think of it is each of those 3 players by themselves could consume 100% of our planned output for the next 5 years. So that's a huge amount of a demand signal. And then in addition, of course, we're having many conversations with other customers that are also quite interested in what we're doing. So our challenge is fundamentally, how do we scale this thing? How do we build not thousands, but millions of these battery cells and put them into large packs and get them out into the field and have them serving customers for these renewable energy integration use cases?
Can you share with us a brief outlook for the future? What else is coming next for EnerVenue and the deployment of your batteries?
Yeah, we've got an exciting year ahead, and then even more exciting what's happening after that. This coming year in 2022, we'll be doing our first megawatt hour scale deployments. Megawatt hours is think of it as the minimum building block for a grid scale or a large commercial and industrial application. We are very, very limited in our capacity. We have about 10 megawatt hours worth of batteries that we can produce in 2022. And we'll be deploying those with key customers at demonstration sites throughout the year. That's 2022. The following year, we'll bring online our what I call our full speed manufacturing line. That's tooling that we're designing and purchasing now. It'll be online roughly 1 year from now. So we'll be proving out that high speed production capacity, and that'll be the key building block for developing large scale battery factories. And we're in the final stages of a selection for a factory that'll be here in the US. We expect our first large-scale factory to be, at full production, it'll be about 10 gigawatt hours. That's 10,000 megawatt hours of production per year. And that'll be a pure 100% made in the USA play. And then we have international partners that we're in deep discussions with, including some of the strategic investors that are part of our most recent fundraising round that plan to participate and help us scale internationally, and that'll come in the years 2024 and beyond.
Wow. Would you like to share any final thoughts regarding the future of the energy storage market or EnerVenue strategy?
Yeah, I think perhaps the energy storage market is a very interesting thing to look at. As recently as 2018, I think the industry was still waiting for a market to appear. Everyone was looking at each other, wondering when would battery storage finally be economically viable and for which use cases and so on. We've now reached a point where energy storage is clearly economically viable for certain use cases. And the most common ones at the grid scale level involve 4 to 6 hours of full capacity battery storage. And they typically revolve around one charge-discharge cycle per day. So use solar panels, charge your battery, and then discharge it that evening or maybe the next morning. What we believe will happen, and that's all that is based on what I consider conventional energy thinking. The energy value chain has been in its current form for over 100 years. So our entire lives, we've been used to plugging electrical devices into wall outlets, and they work, and the grid that supports that and all that infrastructure has been there. And it works based on this basis of a central station power plant, and then a distribution one way over transmission or distribution lines, and then consumed at a point of load like our homes. That is about to be turned upside down, because instead of having things like gas-fired power plants, coal-fired power plants that are very predictable and steady, we're introducing variability. Cheap solar, cheap wind is by far the lowest cost form of generation, but it's variable. It goes up and down with the wind speed, with the solar resource, cloud cover, et cetera. So there's variability there. On the other end of the spectrum, we're electrifying everything. So all the climate models, in order to, how do we mitigate man-made climate change? They begin with electrify everything. Cars, home heating, all, lighting, everything, you name it, goes electric. And then in the middle, we've deregulated the transmission network. So think of the power lines as basically a highway system, and they get congested just like highways. And we're now in most of the world allowing customers to buy power from wherever they want, which means we have huge traffic jams potentially. So think variability everywhere, electrification everywhere, renewable resources everywhere. That changes the economic model completely. And the grid, the electric power industry, as we've known it for the last 100 years, is going to change. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to change, but I'm convinced that it's going to change in a way where we're going to want a lot of batteries that behave kind of like our cell phones do. So that when we have excess power, whether that's solar or wind, or we simply, there's extra electricity out there not being used, we're going to want to charge our batteries pretty quickly. And then we're going to want to discharge those fast or slow, depending on whatever need we have. Again, think your cell phones, and okay, if I'm not talking, my battery's going to last 3 or 4 days. If I'm, on YouTube for hours at a time, it's going to burn pretty quickly, and you get, or using it as a flashlight or whatnot. That means not this simple 1 charge a day cycle, but likely multiple 2, 3, maybe even 4 charge discharge cycles in a given day. And we're going to want batteries that don't wear out and that last forever and that are fully recyclable. And that is what we do. So we think we've got the battery not just for today, but for where the industry is heading in the future.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Jorg.
My pleasure, Alina. Great to meet you. Great to be with you.
Great to meet you too.
Thank you.